All right, well, that's quite the introduction. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, I was doing a presentation similar to this not too long ago here in Charlotte. But before I was going to do the presentation, I had to first drop off my two daughters at school. So I'm driving down Park Road. I've got my 9-year-old daughter in the back. I've got my 5-year-old daughter in the back. And I said, hey, girls, once I drop you off at school, Daddy's going to go uptown Charlotte. You know where those big buildings are, those skyscrapers? And I'm going to get in the elevator, and I'm going to go all the way up to the 22nd floor. And when I get off the 22nd floor, I'm going to go into this big room, and I'm going to stand up on stage, and I'm going to speak to all these people in the room. And the hope is I'm going to speak for an hour that these people that I've never met before are going to be paying attention. And then after I speak, there are going to be all these other presenters. They're going to get up one after another, and we're going to be in this room all day together. And so I said, hey, girls, what do you think about this? Silence. No response. A couple seconds tick by. So I look in the mirror at my 9-year-old daughter, Berkeley, and I said, hey, Berkeley, what do you think about this? A couple more seconds tick by, and then Berkeley finally responds, and she says, Dad, that sounds boring. And I thought to myself, what a pep talk. Here I'm about to go up on stage. I'm going to speak to all these strangers, and the best you've got is, Dad, that sounds boring. So I thought to myself, okay, cool. If I can just get through presentations from that point forward and not bore all of you, then I've at least beat out my daughter's prediction. So here I stand today. My name's Lance Cibik. As it was said, I've got two daughters, 9 and 5, Berkeley and Everly. I live right here in Charlotte in the Dilworth neighborhood. But I also want to let you know that I'm nobody special. Meaning, like, I'm not a celebrity, Greg. I'm not an ex-athlete. I haven't climbed the 10 tallest mountains. I haven't written 12 New York Times best-selling books. I'm simply a guy. I'm simply a man. I'm a person, just like many of you in this room. I'm someone that's experienced adversity, pain, suffering, trials, tribulations. I've felt anxiety and stress and burnout, hopelessness, maybe even a little depression. Also like maybe some of you. But I'm also someone that's experienced joy and triumph and success. Also like many of you in this room. So what I hope to do today is take you on a journey. Now, as I take you on this journey, I know when I'm in your seat, as excited I am to hear from a speaker and what they have to say, when I'm in your seat in the audience, I want to try to relate it to my life. Would you all agree? So as I go through this journey, I would ask you to find yourself somewhere in the journey as it relates to your life. Now, as I go through the journey, you'll see that adversity is a key theme. But what I would suggest to you is, how do you take that adversity that may be in your past? Maybe it's something that you're going through right now today and you brought it in with you. And instead of allowing that adversity to keep you stuck, to hold you back, to box you in, how instead can you take that same adversity and actually use it to be a place that fuels your purpose, that inspires the impact that you can have in this world and in people's lives, that ultimately, yes, can still show up as success, both in your life and in your business. You guys with me? Well, my story got started on May 6, 1980. So if you're trying to do the math, that puts me at 44. I know some of you are surprised. Lots of blueberries and sunscreen to keep me looking younger, Andy Hoffman. But I was born to my mom and my dad, high school sweethearts. Any high school sweethearts in the room? Davin? No? Bill? Okay, we got a couple. Congratulations. No easy feat. Born to my mom and my dad, high school sweethearts, but I was also born to my mom, a high school graduate, and my dad, who initially dropped out of high school. Now, my dad did go on to get his GED, but if you consider for a moment, I was born to my mom and my dad, high school grads now, working hourly wage jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. The odds were stacked against me from the moment I took my first breath in that hospital room. Would you agree? I wasn't born to two college graduates with two great jobs, living in South Park in a nice house down the road, maybe access to private school, money set aside for future college education with a white picket fence and maybe even a golden doodle. The odds were stacked against me to achieve that American version of success from the moment I took my first breath. You see, what I didn't know is that I was going to be met yet with other adversity 4 days before my first birthday. You see, 4 days before my first birthday, it was a Saturday morning, and my dad and I were asleep in the bed. And my mom decided to get up early that Saturday morning, and she drove her car to a nearby shopping center parking lot, if you can envision South Park Mall right down the street. And on that Saturday morning, the stores were just starting to open. The parking lot was somewhat empty. My mom drove her car and she went over to the corner where the dumpsters are. And I try to imagine today what my mom must have been thinking, what she must have been feeling as she sat there alone in that shopping center parking lot. Thoughts and feelings of anxiety, sadness, depression, fear, hopelessness. You see, in that moment, my mom was about to make a decision that would not only impact her life, but would have a ripple effect across many people's lives, including mine, her only son. You see, in that moment, my mom decided to take her own life and commit suicide. My dad and I would wake up that morning to discover 3 letters left on the kitchen table. One letter was written from my mom to her parents. The second letter was written from my mom to my dad. And the third and final letter was written to me, her only son. As I've read through those letters over the years, my mom would go on to ask my dad and her parents to always put me first, to take care of me, to provide for me. As I read the letter from my mom to me, she would go on to tell me how much she loved me. But despite that, she felt like it was the best decision for her. And then she told me goodbye. The days and the weeks ahead were going to be difficult, as you might imagine. Here I am now as a young boy. We were going to celebrate my birthday party actually the very next day. What made it more difficult is that many members of my mom's side of the family, they couldn't fathom that my sweet, beautiful, innocent, late 20s mom could possibly take her own life. And so they had to find an alternative. And they started to turn their attention to my dad. My mom's mom, my grandmother, my mom's sister, my aunt had convinced themselves that my dad was not just my remaining parent, but instead they had convinced themselves that my dad murdered my mom. They would push for a criminal investigation, but nothing was to be found. They would take out a civil lawsuit that eventually was dropped. But what made it more challenging is that my mom's mom, my grandmother, my mom's sister, upon visitation as a young boy, I want you to think 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When I would visit my mom's side of the family, they would sit me down at a kitchen table like this. And they would pull out the big old cassette recorder with the red record button. Anybody old enough to remember those? Oh, yeah. And they'd sit that thing down at the kitchen table, and they'd hit that big red record button. And my mom's mom, my grandmother, my mom's sister, my aunt, they would start to ask me questions like this. Hey, Lance, you remember that Saturday morning going with your dad and your mom to that shopping center parking lot, don't you? Hey, Lance, You remember seeing your dad take that gun and shoot your poor mommy. Don't you? As if 4 days before my first birthday, if it were true, I could somehow recall that information. And that's the way I grew up in those years following my mom's death, wrestling with this question of whether my dad actually did it or not. As I grew up, I had this hole in my heart growing up without my mom. And I was always looking for ways to somehow fill this void, this loss. I didn't celebrate Mother's Day with my mom. Mom wasn't on the sideline cheering me on at soccer and basketball. A couple of years ago in my neighborhood here in Dilworth, now married with kids, I looked out the window one afternoon and I saw a lady across the street named Kathy. And Kathy was pulling her trash bin to the front curb. Everybody got these that got to pull to the front curb? Now, Kathy's in her 60s. She's single, not married, and no kids. And as I watched Kathy start to pull this trash bin to the curb, it looked like she was struggling a little bit with this trash bin. And I thought to myself, if that was my mom, and I was watching my mom struggle to take this trash bin to the curb, what would I do about it? Would I look out the window and just watch it happen? Or would I do something about it? And so I opened up the front door, I went across the street, and I said, hey, Kathy, let me help you with that. And I started to help her take that trash bin to the curb. And then I thought to myself, maybe next week I'll grab that trash bin, before Kathy has the opportunity to pull it to the curb. So next week I pulled that thing to the curb, I pulled the recycling bin to the curb, and then the next day I pulled that trash bin and that recycling bin back to the back of her house. And I started doing this week after week after week. Well, one day Kathy caught me, and she said, hey, Lance, you got a minute? I said, sure, Kathy, what's up? She said, you don't have to pull this trash bin to the curb for me. I'm perfectly capable to do it. And I said, Kathy, no, I got it, I get it, but do you have a couple minutes? She said, sure, Lance, what's up? I said, Kathy, I'd like to share something with you. You see, I lost my mom before I turned 1 year old. I never had the opportunity to do nice things for my mom, like buy her a gift for Christmas, to hug her and tell her I love her. I never had the opportunity to do something so simple as take out the trash for my mom. So Kathy, what you don't know is that I know this means something to you, but it means just as much to me. See, I'm taking my past adversity, this hole in my heart, and it gives me an opportunity to turn it into some purpose in my life, to now come back and impact your life, which ultimately is impacting you each and every week. Now, what you might imagine as she starts to tear up, I start to tear up, and we embrace. This went on for a couple of years, and today, for 4 straight years in a row, I'm doing this for Kathy each and every week. Why is that? See, we're called to love God first, are we not? Secondly, right thereafter, what are we called to do? Love our neighbor as ourselves. I'd ask you to consider, who's your Kathy? Who's the person in your workplace? Who's the person in your neighborhood? Who's the person around you each and every day that so desperately is looking for you to show up and just love and serve them? Not just one time, but consistently, time after time after time. You see, what I didn't know is that Kathy was a great cook. So as I continued to perform trash can duty, all of a sudden one day, after coming home from church on a Sunday, we've all been there, Davin, like, what's for lunch? What's for dinner? Or coming back from a long beach vacation, we're pulling up in the driveway and you're like, hey, refrigerator's empty. The last thing I feel like doing is going out to eat. Everybody with me? Well, Kathy starts dropping off these big bowls of homemade soup that she would make, these big trays of like homemade enchiladas. She found out that I like coffee. Everybody like dark roast or light roast? Dark roast. There we go. You're normal people. Well, she starts figuring out I like dark roast coffee. She drop off these nice big bags of like organic dark roast, like Black Death coffee. Has anybody had that one? That's a good one. It's like $20 a bag. She starts writing me handwritten notes, telling me how much she's thankful and appreciative. She starts buying me gift cards to our nearby restaurants, all from trash can duty. Who's your Kathy? How can you take some loss in your past and don't allow it to keep you down and hold you back and keep you stuck, but how can you actually use that for purpose that actually goes and impacts people's lives that, yes, can show up as success in the form of all the things that Kathy continues to do for our family. My dad eventually got remarried, so I had a stepmom. So I had 3 kids from her that were my step-siblings, and then my dad and my stepmom had 2 additional kids, my 2 half-brothers. But as I grew up in that step family as a young boy and in my teenage years, I was the outcast. I was the kid from another mother. And with that came a certain level of misunderstanding and mistreatment. So much so that my dad and I would move out from time to time because things would get so tense between me and my stepmom and or my step-siblings. Now, during that time, growing up in that step family, at 8 years old, we started going to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. I was an overachiever. And during that process, I became a Christian. And I anchored to John 3:16, I still do today, when I start to get concerned about whether or not I can lose my Christian card. Anybody have those doubts sometimes? Based on what you've done, what you've thought, maybe trials and tribulations that you're facing, whether or not you've lost your Christian card. So even though I became a Christian at a young age and growing up in that step family, I was always asking myself the question, God, where are you in this? Because this step family situation is pretty difficult. So much so that I was moving in and out of the house with my dad and then coming back into the step family. It got so bad at the time that I had convinced myself that if my mom thought it was the best decision for her to leave, and oh, by the way, heaven is a better place than here on earth, then maybe I should also check out too. I was 13 years old, and I remember that afternoon, I sat down in my bedroom, shut the door. I found a ruler that had a metal edge on it. And I thought to myself, if I can just go across my wrist fast enough and hard enough, I'll break skin and hit a vein. And I can bleed out. I can meet my mom. And I can get to heaven a lot quicker. Now, I'm thankful to God that I was unsuccessful that afternoon, but ultimately it was a catalyst that led to my dad and my stepmom divorcing. So here I am as a 9th grader and a 10th grader, now just living with my dad in our own apartment. In my 11th grade year, my dad decided that he wanted to live with a girlfriend at the time. And after some difficult conversation with my dad and I made the decision that I wasn't going to go live with my dad and this girlfriend. That instead I was going to live alone in my own apartment. So here I am wrapping up my junior year at 17 years old, and I'm now living in my own apartment. And it stayed that way my entire senior year of high school. Now, some of you about right now are saying, say that again. So you got to live alone in your own apartment in high school? Sign me up for that. Who wants to sign up for that? Nobody? You don't want to take the trade? I mean, there were some benefits. That means I could go to bed when I want. I could drink what I want. I could have whoever I wanted over. No chaperone. But it also meant, Andy, that means I had to do the laundry on my own. Greg, that meant that I had to go do my grocery shopping. Nobody was making me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was just me. And it was about that time I had to make a decision. What was I going to do about it? So number one, I had to decide that I was going to be the change. This is a mindset shift. You can apply this to your life today. Also think about this, so what, now what? That despite my past circumstances and despite where I found myself today, how was I going to respond to it? How was I going to react to it? You see, nobody was coming to save me. It was just me. I had to decide that I was going to be the change, that despite the circumstances, that despite the adversity, what was I going to do about it? If I wanted to one day go to college and one day be successful, I was going to have to make some decisions that were different despite what I was born into and despite what I had faced at that time. Maybe some of you can relate. Maybe there's something that you're facing right now that you've got to decide that you're going to respond to differently, that you're going to decide that you're going to be the change despite the circumstances that you find yourself in today. But see, I talk to a lot of people, both in speaking as well as in my coaching practice, and many of us think, but not everybody takes action. So number two, I would suggest that you have to rise up. You got to take thoughts and you got to put them into action. Just like I had to do at that point in high school, I had to work 5 days a week. I had to decide that I was going to focus on grades because I knew that if I could focus on grades and work 5 days a week to help pay the bills, that one day that was going to lead to the opportunity to get into college, UNC Charlotte, with federal grant student loans and working 5 days a week at a restaurant, getting good grades, that I could somehow one day be successful. But I had to take action. I had to rise up and do things that others were not willing to do in order to achieve that. Maybe some of you got to decide to take action, even if it's messy action. Number three, I had to decide to hustle. One of my favorite t-shirts used to be black, but now it's a faded version of black. It's kind of grayish. Everybody got that t-shirt in their closet that used to be one color, but now it's a different color. Maybe it's got some rips or some holes in it. Everybody got one of those? And you just can't get rid of it. It just says one word, hustle. I had to make a decision that I was going to do one extra repetition, that I was going to work a little bit harder than those around me in order to create that separation so that I could set myself up for future success. Maybe some of you got to decide to hustle. You got to put that extra repetition in now, not only in your life, but also maybe in your business to create that separation, which led to number four. I was a high school athlete, both in basketball and soccer, and I still play full court basketball today, believe it or not. Anybody wants to meet me at the Dowd YMCA, Wednesday at 5:30 in the morning and Friday at 5:30 in the morning, I'll post you up and I'll get every single rebound. But it got me ready for number four, game time. You see, if I decided that I was going to be the change, it was a mindset shift. Number two, I decided I was going to rise up and take action, even if it was messy action versus perfect action. Number three, I decided that I was going to put in one extra repetition than you. I was going to look to the person in front of me, behind me, to the left and the right, and I was going to create that separation. Then I was ready for game time. I was ready to play anyone, anywhere, anytime. Your field, David, or my field, doesn't matter. Your court or my court, doesn't matter. And that's the mindset that I took through high school and then all through college. Now, when I graduated college, I got into banking and financial services and wealth management. And I spent time climbing the corporate ladder from assistant vice president to senior vice president. And I got to a place in my early 30s where I said, hey, I beat the odds stacked against me. I'm wearing a custom suit to work. I'm driving a BMW. I'm living in the nice neighborhood in Dilworth. I'm making good income. I'm putting money away. I've got net worth. I've got assets. Life's pretty good. Would you agree? I beat the odds stacked against me from the moment I took my first breath. You see, what I didn't know is that there was tragedy right around the corner. It was a Saturday night in my early 30s. I was having a beer sitting on my couch. And I got a call from some friends, and they said, hey, Lance, why don't you meet us over here in Park Road Shopping Center area and have a beer with us? And I said, okay, cool. It's Saturday night. I had one beer. I knew I was okay to drive. So I got in my car, and I started driving down Park Road. Now, on the way to meet my friends, I had to pass through an intersection near this restaurant bar called Ed's Tavern. Anybody been to Ed's Tavern? And see, on Saturday night, there was a Duke-Carolina basketball game being played that night inside of Ed's Tavern. The place was packed. I could see that as I was approaching the intersection. There were people inside. There were people outside. Now, what I didn't know is that there was an altercation taking place between two guys. One guy was hitting on another guy's girlfriend. And that altercation led to the front door of Ed's Tavern. When one of the guys that was heavily intoxicated that was hitting on the other guy's girlfriend stumbled into the street at the exact time my car was passing by. I end up hitting this man. I ran over him from the front of my car to the back of my car. I could feel every crunch. I could hear every crack. And once my car came to a resting spot, I knew I had to call 911.
Hello?
Yeah.
What is the address of your emergency?
Ed's Tavern, Ideal Way in Park Road. I was driving up Park Road, and apparently these guys are telling me now that somebody pushed this guy on the road. It was right in front of me.
Did he get hit by a car or?
Yeah, I was driving the car.
Okay, are you with him now?
There's people outside in the street with him. I'm freaking out. There's people with him right now.
All right, we're going to have help on the way. I just need to get a little bit of information from you. About how old is he, sir?
I don't know. I'm scared to go out there. I'm going to hit somebody. He may be dead. I don't know.
Is he awake?
No, I think he's unconscious or something. I think he may be dead. I ran over him.
Okay,
I don't know. I'm scared to go out
he's
there.
breathing?
Is the guy okay? No, he's not okay. He can come fast.
Okay.
Please hurry. Please hurry.
Sir, help is on the way. Is he breathing?
Okay. No, is he breathing? Yes, he's breathing.
Okay, are there chemicals or other
He's not
hazards
conscious. He's
involved?
breathing. He's unconscious, though.
Okay, sir,
He has a pulse.
the ambulance is on the way.
This man did not make it that night. So here I am in my early 30s. One man's being put on trial for murder. The second man is now dead. And then there's me. I started wrestling with questions. Hey, God, where are you in all of this? Could you not have helped me avoid this? Did you allow for it? Did you cause it? See, I needed God to show up in my life some way, somehow. And what I didn't know is that there was another man by the name of Land Height, who you saw in the video earlier. Land and I used to work together years prior to this event. And Land had read about my accident in the newspaper. And he said that when he was reading about my accident in the paper, he said, I know this guy, Lance. Now, Land and I didn't have each other's phone numbers, emails. We weren't keeping in touch. But somehow, some way, he found my address. And he wrote me a handwritten note. It was the only handwritten note that I received at this time. And he basically said, hey, Lance, I read about your accident and my heart broke for you. And I felt a prompt by the Holy Spirit to reach out. Here's my card. If you ever want to have a call or a cup of coffee, I look forward to hearing from you. Well, one cup of coffee led to many cups of coffees and breakfast and lunches, and Land became a major mentor in my life for the past 13 years. He started doing life with me. He started coming alongside of me. He helped answer some of life's tough questions. He helped turn me back to my Christian faith. I got to a place where I was mature enough, and I believed that one day I could maybe get married, that I found a girlfriend that became my fiance, that became my wife. Today I'm married with a daughter, Berkeley and Everly. I got to a place in my walk where Lance said, hey, Lance, I've got this son named Chad. And Chad was 10 years younger than me. And Chad was struggling with drugs and alcohol and some mental health stuff. And he said, Lance, will you spend some time with my son named Chad? I said, sure, Land, anything for you, man. You've been such a big help for me. So Chad and I would get together and we'd have lunch or we'd have coffee. And Chad would open up and I would open up. Chad would share and I would share. Chad was vulnerable, I was vulnerable. He was authentic and I was authentic. And Chad and I started doing life together. What started off as Land being the mentor and me the mentee, I became the mentor to Chad and Chad the mentee. And all three of us start doing life together, coming alongside of each other, pouring into each other. Well, Chad ultimately goes to rehab and gets on the other side of recovery. He's clean and sober. And Chad says, well, hey, how do I go back and help the past version of myself that I used to be when I was struggling with drugs and alcohol and mental health challenges? So Chad decides that he's going to go back to school at CPCC to get his education in substance abuse. Number two, he starts a podcast called the Rabbit Hole Podcast, where he starts sharing his story about overcoming his adversity and providing other people hope and inspiration and encouragement. He starts bringing on guests that have their version of adversity and sharing hope and inspiration again for the podcast listeners. Number 3, he starts speaking into schools. He would go into high schools and he would talk about drugs and alcohol and how to avoid these substances so that you could avoid ending up like him, that he struggled with that for over a decade. And then lastly, number 4, he starts working at a place here in Charlotte called Charlotte Rescue Mission. Anybody heard of it? He starts working the night shifts there, coming alongside of men and women that most of us in this room may turn our head towards and say thanks but no thanks. He starts working the overnight shift and pouring into the past version of himself, saying, hey, I get you, I see you, I once was you, let me come alongside of you. See, Chad was also leading by example. He was loving God first, and number 2, he was loving and serving his neighbor. He was acting in a selfless manner to go back and help the past version of himself. Chad started encouraging me to speak. He said, Lance, I'm speaking into high schools. Why don't you go and share your story? I said, Chad, thanks, but no thanks, bro. I'm not sharing any type of story from my personal life. He said, well, I know you got a story because you shared it with me. Why don't you start going to share it? So I shared my story for the first time at Forest Hill Church down Park Road where I go to church. Chad was there. Land was there front row. So was Greg Cash. So was Lewis. Which led to me sharing in high schools, which led to me sharing in other places about 2 years ago. So much so that today, after 22 years in corporate America, working for banks and wealth management and financial services, I'm speaking for a living. Because Chad was encouraging me. He was showing me how to take your past adversity and use it as a place that helps you fuel your purpose, that allows you to go out and impact the world. That, oh yes, by the way, can also lead to success. In June of 2024, just last year, Chad, on a Sunday night when Charlotte Rescue Mission was doing the ribbon cutting for the new facility, Chad was working the overnight shift on that Sunday night. And when all the men had gone to sleep on that Sunday night, Chad then went to his room and he went to sleep. But that Monday morning, at 33 years old, Chad didn't wake up. He died in his sleep due to a heart condition. But if you consider for a moment, Chad gets clean and sober at 30 years old. He then spends the next 3 years, as I just told you, using his past pain and suffering and adversity for purpose. And he died at 33 years old. Who else died at 33 years old? As we come to a close, I'd ask you to consider a couple of questions. Who's your land? Who's the man or woman in your life that's pouring into you, that's coming alongside of you each and every day, week, month, year? Who are they? Have you thanked them? Have you made sure that they know how much you appreciate them? And if you don't have a land, where can you find a land? Maybe it's in your church. Maybe there's a men's or ladies group that you can join. Maybe there's a person that's right in your community or at your workplace that you look up to and you respect for a variety of different reasons. Maybe it's your time to reach out to that person and consider asking them to spend some time with you. Who's your land? But most importantly, as we close, I'd ask you to consider, who's your Chad? Who's the person out there right now that you are expertly positioned to help, to come alongside of, to love, to serve? You see, what started off as a tragedy on a Saturday night, which leads to Land Height feeling a prompt by the Holy Spirit to not just think, but actually take action to write me a handwritten note, which leads to Land helping me come back to my Christian faith, helping me answer a lot of life's tough questions, which gets me to a place where I can now start pouring back into his son, Chad, which Chad gets to a place where he can start pouring back into me and encouraging me to do things that I felt uncomfortable with, which now gets me to a place where I'm standing in front of you all this afternoon speaking in many ways because Chad, in God's grace and God's movement in all of our lives, who's your Chad? Who's the person out there that so desperately needs you to come alongside of them that you're expertly positioned to help, that you're expertly positioned to guide? Who's your Chad? I want to thank you all for spending time with me this afternoon. I'm happy to stick around, Bill, and others to take questions if you have them. Look forward to catching up with you. Thank you.